How is everyone? Good. Before I introduce Dr. Elizabeth Burbach Gallardo, a couple of thank yous are due. First, I'd like to thank Professor Jerry McCarthy for his hard work in arranging the Writers at Work speaker series, of which this is the first speaker of the season. Although sometimes I think this job, his efforts have helped foster the important role of intellectual conversations throughout the staff community. As well, I'd like to thank Ginny Dunnigan and the rest of the library staff for making accommodations for us. Finally, and most importantly, thank all of you for coming out today, even if you were asked to come here as part of your class. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today's speaker. Dr. Gallardo is an urban ethnographer. Actually, I can call her softball Liz, too, that softball player. Is an urban ethnographer whose work bridges the disciplines of cultural anthropology, folklore, and American studies. Her focus is actually the street, bit of a street archivist, I guess, where she is concerned with the nature and significance of cultural landscapes, social geography, public culture, and everyday aesthetics. Her doctoral fieldwork, which is done at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, was conducted on the ballfields of the Dominican Republic, where she studied baseball at the local level and takes a bottom-up look at Major League Baseball's industry, a business colloquially referred to as a factory without smokestacks. Liz will do the Spanish translation for that for me. Today, Liz will share her work on the impact of baseball and the baseball industry in Boca Chica. Liz also plays a copious amounts of men's and co-ed softball throughout New York City and manages the men's modified team and 2013 champs, the Dead Rabbits.
Dead Rabbits.
All right. Thank you.
When I was a little girl, I wanted to play baseball for the New York Yankees. Can you hear me? The Yankees.
See,
Is it not
the
on?
microphone's not working properly. Dr. Bowen, the microphone's not working.
Now see, y'all
There
spoiled
you
my
go.
lead. How's that?
Better.
Isn't there supposed to be a collective yay for the Yankees when more Yankees mentioned? Or not?
When I was a little girl, I wanted to play ball for the New York Yankees.
Yes.
Anyone else have that dream? Anyone want to play ball for the Yankees when they were growing up? Any other ball team? No one wanted to play pro ball? I'm the only one with a dream? You! What was the dream?
Mets.
But that's the Mets?
Yeah.
Well, we're on opposite sides, but still, it's a New York team. Awesome. Still got that dream?
A little unrealistic now, but it'd be great.
Yep. How about you?
Either a football or basketball player.
Still, what's your team?
Chargers.
Very good. Well, mine might be unreasonable also, but I still hold the dream. And as Dr. Bowen mentioned, I play copious amounts of softball. I play about seven leagues a season. I average about 12 games a week. In fact, my last game was just this Sunday, finals for my men's team, the Dead Rabbits. One of my guys broke his thumb the night before. I went in to catch, and I have a war wound, a battle scar, people. Right here, can you see it? I was catching, and my pitcher was throwing low and short, and I kept taking it in the ear, taking it for the team, trying to protect that ball. There was a lot of blood going on, and you know what? I felt really blessed, really blessed. You know, we in the U.S., I think, by and large, are really blessed. When it comes to baseball, most of us can buy gear when we need it. Our cleats wear out, and we can get a new pair. Our fields are accessible. Most of them are pretty good. They're not super, MLB manicured, but they're doable. They're not ankle breakers for the most part. We're blessed. In fact, baseball is becoming somewhat like a luxury item. 11-year-old boy in Princeton, New Jersey decides maybe he wants to play pro ball when he grows up, and his mommy and his daddy pay a retired MLB player to coach his pitching. He's 11 years old. It's a luxury of affluence, and it's also a luxury of choice. That boy in Princeton, New Jersey, he can decide what he wants to be when he grows up. He has options that not everyone has. Maybe he wants to be a professional ball player, maybe an engineer. But if one doesn't work out, he can just turn to the next. 11-year-old Dominican boys are playing for their lives. Baseball is no luxury, it's a necessity. Most Dominicans don't have the luxury of affluence and of choice, so they play ball for their lives and they play ball for their families at 11 years old. These 11-year-old boys who are playing for their lives and for the lives of their family are putting their lives, their hope and their faith in a system that will devour and dismiss most of them. So I stand here before you as a ball player today, a wounded ball player, and I'm here to talk about Dominican baseball. So did you know that the DR produces more ball players than any country outside of the United States? You know that, anyone else? Over 400 ball players are signed a year. This season, the 215 opening day roster, 83 Dominicans were represented. The highest of any other country, and they have been the highest on opening day roster since 1995. Right now, they're about 10% of all active players on the major leagues. They are over half of all foreign-born minor league players. So this is a result of these amazing numbers, right? A result of the incredible talent of Dominican ball players. But it's also due to the industry grown around their production. An industry that is colloquially called una industria sin chimeneas. An industry, a manufacturing plant, a factory without smokestacks. My research is a bottom-up look at that industry and its impact, right, on the local community. I'm an ethnographer. This talk is based on the research I conducted in the DR, but the deal is ethnography, right? What is that? As an ethnographer, I go into the field. The field can be anywhere. And I strive to live as others live and to see the world through their eyes and to learn about what it is to be human in a particular time, in a particular place, within a particular group. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz called this deep hanging out, right? So in the DR, I did deep hanging out on the ball fields. I played ball, I watched ball, I helped practices, I talked with people, I interviewed a lot of people, and I drank rum and played dominoes. It was really, really hard. So once I do all that, part of ethnography is also writing down description. It's about putting down on paper the stories and the lives of human beings so that other people can access and understand that. So it's not just for me and for now, but it's also for you and for posterity, right? So that in 100 years from now, we want to know something about what it was like in the DR on the ground in the baseball industry. So this is the deal, right? DR baseball is a huge topic, right? Where do you start? And I asked some friends, I said, what would you be interested in hearing? And I talked to my Dominican collaborators and I said, what do you think people should know? And there was no consensus. That's how big the topic is. But there is one thing that pops up a lot when you talk about Dominican baseball, and that's the idea of poverty. We hear a lot about it, right? But it seems kind of abstract, right? So we hear baseball as a way sort of desperate Dominicans seek to rise out of poverty. We hear successful Dominican ball players, how they used a milk carton glove when they were a kid and stole their sister's doll head so they had something to hit with. You know, but it seems the way it's spun almost romantic. It's certainly not. And this baseball industry, right, the people are getting in order to save their lives and that of their families. What is that about? So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the baseball industry, the factory without smokestacks, while we explore this idea of poverty. And we can't do one without the other, because the two are bound together. Poverty is both the context and the resource for baseball in the Dominican Republic. And now I go to the note cards. So, where is the Dominican Republic? We don't always know these things. So here we are. This is where I do work. This is where those ball players come from. Here's Florida, Cuba, the next place. And here's where I do work, predominantly right around here. Boca Chica. Technology wants to beat me. Right around Santo Domingo, about a half an hour out. Now, when we're talking about this idea of poverty and about these guys who we're really proud of, who are able to rise above it, Pedro Martinez is a great example, right? What just happened to Pedro? Anyone know?
Hall of Fame.
What's that?
Hall of Fame. He got into the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. This past June, right? Anyone catch that live? He had a great, great speech. Very, very long. And a very, very bright suit where he celebrates both the DR and the US. So Pedro Martinez grew up in Managuayago, which is a part of Santo Domingo. And he's always talked about how he grew up in a one-room home with his 2 parents and his 5 siblings. The floor was dirt and the tin roof leaked. I really got to hand it to Pedro. He's a great ball player. And I'm almost over the fact that he tossed Don Zimmer down on the ground in the 2003 ACLS series. Anyone see that? Anyone remember that? Bad Pedro. But this is sort of the idea, right? This is the idea that we know and we understand. And this kind of comes out of stories of Pedro and Panamanian Mariano Rivera. And that's Pedro doing his dance of joy. So here we are. We've got Pedro Martinez. He's one of the lucky 2%, right? We say 83 ball players a year today, right? This year, 83 ball players from the Dominican Republic, over 400 signed every year. But the fact of the matter is, only 2% of those men ever make it to the major leagues. 2%. There are thousands of unemployed ball players every year. All those 11-year-old boys who become 12, 13, 14, 16, 18 are unemployed. Pedro is lucky. But this is Andres, which is a sister city right outside of Boca Chica. It was once the batey for Ingenio Boca Chica. Ingenio Boca Chica was a sugar plantation. The batey is like the workers' quarters, right? The company town. Bateys struggle in the Dominican Republic because they don't really produce sugar the way they used to. So what we have here is a very good example of on the ground, the beginning of production of baseball players. Everyone begins to play on the street. Everyone. You don't go to school at first, you don't read books, you don't do that. You start to play on the street. You watch ball, you listen to ball, you listen to your family and friends discutiendo or arguing baseball, and that's how you learn. Here we have a bat and a ball. These are the only ones within several blocks. Or I'm sorry, a bat and a glove. These are the only ones within several blocks. And they're playing with a pelota de trapo. Dominican culture is an outside culture. And you'll see houses here like the ones Pedro described. These are cinder block houses with tin roofs and dirt floors. You're lucky if you have screens on the windows in this neighborhood. You'll probably have shutters, but you won't have glass. It's an outside culture because it's very, very hot and overcrowded in your home. So you hang out on the street, you socialize on the street, and you play ball on the street. What's pretty cool about this is we get to look at some repurposed materials, right? We play ball. These guys are lucky because they have a little bit of equipment, but they're playing with a handmade pelote de trapo, which I learned to make. And everyone has their own recipe, you know? Basically, it's a rock or a marble encased with rags, folded over into a sock. Oh, we're gonna work on that. And these particular ones, this one is covered in masking tape. You don't get to keep these guys. Duct tape.
Yo, Rich,
Here is a closer look at this pelote de trapo.
I thought you had
Right? So I know guys who can make this spin and curve. I know a guy who has a recipe, you know, you put a marble in it, you wrap it up with old inner tubes, and it floats just like a curveball. That's what he says. But the deal is, we play with this because we don't always have equipment. 41% of the population is unemployed. 5% of the population holds all the wealth and the resources. Got another piece of material culture here, because it's awesome. Anyone know the game of Bitilla? No Bitilla? You know Bitilla? Tell us about Bitilla.
I used to play when I was
Really? Where are you from?
yeah.
What city?
I was at the
So tell us about Bitilla.
well, it's like this top of the like the gallon of water thing,
Mhm.
and you would take it out and you kind of would like throw it on an angle and then hit it with like a stick.
Yep, absolutely. You don't have a bat, all you need is a machete and a wood source. You steal your mom's broom, your mom's mop, there you go. You steal your sister's doll, or you go through the garbage for these 5-gallon water bottle tops. I don't know if you know these originals, they're remaking them now. There's the original and then there's the flat one. You know this one. This one, can you pitch one?
Well, we would just like throw it like on an
Yeah, I can't do it.
I'm not good.
Oh, it's not bad. This one is much harder. This is the one, 76 that started, then they replaced them with these. They don't float as well, and they're more difficult to hit.
These are some of the secrets to Dominican baseball. But it really comes from making do with what one has and repurposing objects. As you see, this young girl has a piece of metal for that. And she was the one, that's her pelota de trapo, or rag ball. We make kites. Kite flying is big in the DR. As you see, everyone's out on the streets. We make kites out of pieces of palm and plastic bags and some string. We cook outside in Andres, especially when we're having a party. This is loquillo, making some rice to go with mondongo, which is like tripe stew. More vernacular architecture. So now we're here at Boca Chica. Boca Chica is also called Baseball City. Tourism and the free trade market are now the biggest source of revenue for the Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is also, by the way, economically dependent upon the U.S., both for exports and for imports. So, as you saw, Andres doesn't get like a whole bunch of goods from the tourist trade. Boca Chica gets a little bit better because they are at the center of it. They are also at the center of a all sorts of things that cause them strife that come along with tourism. Tourism has not given to the country what it promised to do. It makes more money for the state, or for international companies than it does for the state, and more for the state than for Dominican people, most of whom are unemployable in that sector. So people turn to things around the formal tourist economy into the informal tourist economy, such as drugs and sex tourism. Sex tourism and child prostitution in Boca Chica is huge. And I mention that to point out sort of the disparity between what we think might be the world that we live in, and also to highlight the fact that this global process of tourism is very, very similar to the global business of baseball. Boca Chica is at the center of it all. This is my MLB at-bat app telling me that information about the wild card game, so sorry. So here's where I did a lot of my work. This is a local Dominican club, Juan Alberto Zoria. Dominican clubs are sport, culture, and recreation clubs. They're like the Y, or more like boys and girls clubs. They are there to have a safe place for kids to go, get kids off the streets, introduce them to cultural activities, and to play sports like baseball. Here in Club Juan Alberto Zoria, this is, by the way, the second step. So Pedro Martinez, Big Papi, Manny Ramirez, Albert Pujols, they all started playing on the street. They all were playing in clubs too. Not a lot of amenities here, so at this level as well, people are struggling for resources. You play with balls whose casings are falling off, your bats that grip are duct taped together because they're falling apart. These are Boca Chiquenses, people from Boca Chica, enjoying an evening softball game. There are more motos, or motorcycles, than people parked behind the backstop. So, I get ahead of myself here. Club Azoria. Fields in the Dominican Republic are not often tended to by any caretaker. This one is particularly lucky, Luis Hernandez, my friend. They're usually tended to by the boys who play on them. They weed by hand. These guys have a hose. This club is doing pretty okay. But they all work together towards cultivating the land and cultivating their craft. Willie Martinez, pitching coach here. Giovanni Azuna. You can see the La Maya, the net that they're doing soft toss in, is a little worse for wear. It's a great way to learn how to hit line drives, by the way, soft toss into the net. If you don't have a net, use a fence. This is Junior. He's showing off some more material culture. These are potes. Water, they're 5-pound weights, pretty much. Pote is a weight. He's filled them with concrete. They weigh 5 pounds. These pitchers are exercising with potes filled with sand, weigh about 3 pounds. Here. So the deal is, why I go through this is because in Boca Chica, at the club level, not only are people being trained for baseball, but they're being socialized, right? They're getting them off the street. They're also trying to teach them how to make choices. So Boca Chica is the Boca Chiquenses feel Boca Chica is a place where the moral fiber has been lost, where people are looking for the easy thing, gotten the easy way. Usually that easy thing is money. And usually the easy way is not so easy because it, as far as Boca Chiquenses are concerned, it destroys human lives. It actually destroys them. because people are murdered, people get sick, people die, but it destroys the long-term goals, right? And that includes Major League Baseball. This is Sammy Sosa's house in Consuelo, the house he grew up in. This is Consuelo as well. You can see that the field at Clovisoria is has far more money behind it. Here we're still cleaning it up and working it up so we have a place to play. This kid has got great form right here. Training boys to be ball players. But in Boca Chica again, right? If you don't have the field costs money. What do? The beach is free, at least until the tourists get up. Then they push you off. But all you have to do is string a net between 2 palm trees, and you have a great space for a soft toss. Beaches are used for running laps. Beaches are used for all sorts of activities because the sand is in fact really good for you. Sand develops a lower body. The ball on sand moves every which way, just like it does on an unmanicured field. Working on unmanicured spaces, your reflexes get better, your eyesight gets better, you become a better ball player. That's something the 11-year-old boy in Princeton, New Jersey doesn't have. He has everything else. He doesn't have that. And when he gets on one of those, he won't know what to do. We make do with what we have again. Here we are. We're going to do some warm-ups, some running drills. All you got to have is some coconuts. These guys got a hold of some regular cones. And this is my friend Luis Fernandez, trainer and caretaker again, working on the side with a boy, teaching him how to pitch. You don't need much. Most people just take a little corner of whatever they can get. Baja de Mata. There's no room, there's not enough fields. The Dominican Republic does not invest in baseball. There are no fields. You play on the street corner, you play in the street, you play Baja de Mata, underneath a tree, anywhere you can find space. These are young boys, younger than the 11-year-old boy in Princeton, New Jersey, who are playing Little League for Club Guanajuato Zoria. And they travel around and they meet people. They go to other towns and play against other leagues so they can make friends and learn how to live in the world. This woman here is Norma Diaz. She's the first and only woman in the Dominican Baseball Hall of Fame. She's the only female to have played baseball, minor league baseball, in the Dominican Republic. And she is lauded as being not only a great ball player, but a superb human, an example for everyone to follow. So, there go Yankees. You notice even her field there is not as clean as we'd like, or as we're accustomed to. Trash is very prevalent in the Dominican Republic, but it can also be useful for making bases, and of course, making other materials to play with. So my friend Chepe, who works for the Pirates Academy, he works in the clubhouse, he maintains the clubhouse. He also trains boys in Huatier. Huatier is outside of Boca Chica. Huatier is also a former Bete. Like I said, Betes struggle. This is Huatier here. One day I was talking to Chepe. He articulated a conundrum for me. He was telling me about the boys he trains. He has like 5, 6 levels, and they go out and they play beat games. But he also trains boys specifically, like ages 13 to 16, to play for MLB, to compete for them. He charges, in 2011, he charged 20 pesos a week per player. 20 pesos in 2011 was like 70 cents. He said, you know, Elizabeth, nobody pays. Because how can they pay? They don't have money to buy food. There is no food to eat. How can you play ball when there is no food to eat? My ball players come on 1 egg and a glass of milk. On a glass of milk and some yuca. Cane and yuca is not enough to live on. And this is the conundrum, right? So baseball is like the big dream. It's the promise of un salto grande, the big jump in social and economic status for Dominicans, right? Why the 11-year-old boys are playing for their lives and the lives of their families. But fact of the matter is, it is highly ambivalent, right? It's the promise, the potential, but if you don't have the resources to utilize it, then it's a painful dream, is what it is. Nobody can play ball on a diet of milk and yuca and cane and yuca. But they do, because they're playing for their lives. So this day here, when I took this, was a torneo campesino, a rural country tournament, like very competitive, very boisterous. And the light was really good, which is why I'm showing you these photos. But it gives you a sense of what it's like to be out in the rural areas, a little bit different, and the ubiquitous chicken. I always gotta have the chicken. A little bit what it's like outside of sort of major spots. A lot of pirates coming out. So many of these guys are around the age that they're trying out. Some of them are too old now. When you're 18, you're too old. So this is the deal. This is when we start getting into the baseball industry. Why do I talk about this from the ground up? This is what it's like on the ground. They start playing on the street with whatever they can find. They take that and they make that into something useful for them. They go into clubs and they keep playing. And then they go into a more specialized situation with a buscon. Perhaps you've heard of those. Buscones are not all evil. But you do specialized training in order to move on to the major leagues. So how did MLB get there? I just want to go very quickly. MLB got there. Baseball was introduced via Cuba in the late 1800s. Military presence of the U.S. during 2 interventions or invasions, as my collaborators would say, extended that. But the academy system did not really develop until the 70s. So there was exchanges between the countries. American players would come down and play in the DR and so forth. And so there were always scouts throughout the Americas. And but after the Cuban Revolution in 1959, that's when people really started going to the DR. Cuba was no longer viable as a place for exchange, and so they went to the DR. And it slowly developed, but it wasn't until the late 1900s, or the late 1990s, that the industry really took off. So what is this industry, right? So the factory without smokestacks centers on MLB, and it centers on MLB academies like this Yankees Academy in Boca Chica. Looks like a plantation house. So the deal is, MLB wants boys who are 16 years old, no less. That's not true. They want them a lot less. But they can't sign you really until you are 17 years old, but they will sign you as long as you'll turn, you can sign you at 16 as long as you'll turn 17 before the end of the season. They want boys 16 years old and no more, because at 18, you're too old in the DR. Age has everything to do with economic value, which is why 11-year-old boys are training, right? The increase of the academy system had a lot to do with change in the reserve clause in the 70s. Do you guys know about the change in the reserve clause? So, anyone know what the reserve clause is? So the reserve clause bound players to a team, right? If I sign with the Orioles, I am bound to the Orioles for all eternity. Unless you gave me unconditional release. So you could not play me, you could not pay me, but I could not play for anywhere else. So when that started changing in the 1970s, Major League Baseball decided to go look for cheaper and more malleable talent elsewhere because that escalated prices. So what happens? You go in, everyone wants to try it. It's July 2nd. July 2nd, you're 16 years old, you want to get a contract. You go, you try out, it is a little bit of a cattle call, and if you're lucky, you get signed to a 3-year contract. You might start off with a 90-day that extends into the 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, you're either sent up to the minor leagues or you're released. But what's really cool about those 3 years is the Dominican Summer League ball, and this is where we get back to Baseball City, right? So Boca Chica Baseball City is right at the center of this action. All 30 MLB teams have their own academy now in the Dominican Republic. 21 of them are in or around Boca Chica. Even the bank is in Boca Chica. This is a bank where all Major League ball players are required to place their money. When I sign a contract, I have to deposit that money in this bank, MLB's bank, that then reinvest its money in MLB. Within my 3 years, I spend 6 days a week sequestered. I'm fed, I'm housed, I'm clothed. Everything I do is ball. I practice twice a day. I might have English classes. They always talk about that. Culture classes. And on Sundays, between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., I'm allowed to go visit my family or my girlfriend. So, you know what? I think all of us who enjoy ball, who want to play ball, go like, awesome, awesome. I can spend all my time playing ball, awesome. And that is really awesome. The whack is that the baseball industry is not just MLB. There's extensions, right? Like the tourist industry. It has some informal economies around it. The baseball industry also has informal economies around it. People who are trying to make money in the same way Major League Baseball is trying to make money. Everyone has their hand in the pot. You have trainers, you have buscones, you have parents who push their children to play, parents who get involved in the negotiation of a contract. One boy sits down with one representative to negotiate a contract. The next thing you know, there's 25 people there saying they have a hand in the pot. The contract value has been raised only to the extent that MLB will allow it, but the amount that the individual ball player gets is sadly reduced. So this 11-year-old boy, who's now maybe 16 years old, who's been playing for his life and the life of his family, now finds himself in a position where he's just been screwed by everybody who was supposed to protect him. His parents, his family members, his trainer. Imagine how that must feel like. To have spent your life trying to do this, and then to find yourself betrayed by everyone who's supposed to take care of you. And you're a legal minor who has dropped out of school. And besides, any of us still in high school at 16, would we know how to negotiate a contract? Not at all. So it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And then if you're released after 3 years, your money's already gone. You have no education. If you could go to college, maybe you could be an engineer like that 11-year-old boy in Princeton, New Jersey. But frankly, there are no jobs for engineers. In Boca Chica, there are engineers sweeping the floors of hotels, which is why 11-year-old boys play for their lives in the Dominican Republic. And it's not just these, this sort of informal economy is really expanding in very creepy ways. So a friend of mine who lives in New York was talking to me about the situation with his family. So his brother, his nephew, the son of his brother, was training and seeking a contract. And one of these new schools, these new scouts came out. These scouts, who are lawyers and dentists and other people who don't have anything properly to do with bowl, are going into the DR, setting up their own academies, so on. So they came to see this, one of these guys came to see his kid, and he said that he would like to, he thought he had talent, and he wanted to represent him. But first, he wanted to see the rest of the family all together. He asked for generations of the family to stand in the same room so he could judge the physical value of this young boy. Right, so the story that I got was they were pretty much all lined up, like at a slave trade, and the man almost looked at their teeth. But what he wanted to do was to see how big this kid might get, what kind of stock he was from, and where he might go, which again is very much like the slave trade. And the family is really insulted. And then the man said he was pleased, and he offered to buy their son. Not loan them some money so they might get something for themselves, but rather buy. He offered a sum of money to buy their son so that in the future he could represent him freely and take whatever he wanted or could get from that relationship. This is baseball in the Dominican Republic. This is the factory without smokestacks. So, these academies, right, are sort of the extended farm system. That's the pretty side. And then we see this not so pretty side, this side that's a little bit like a slave trade, a little bit like a factory without smokestacks. So imagine again being 11 years old or 16 years old, and now they're signing guys again at 13 and 14 years old with the new player development academies that are there specifically to protect young Dominican ball players for bad Dominicans who seek to hurt them. So now they're pre-signing kids. It's a pre-signing contract at 13, 14 years old. And some guy said, it's really creepy, I don't like it, but what are you gonna do? Because if I don't sign him, someone else will. That's all right, they've been hiding boys for years. So, it might seem that the baseball industry is a little bit convoluted, certainly the way I presented it. And it is really convoluted, which is why it's really hard even for me to wrap my head around, right? I went down to the DR, and frankly, look, I love baseball. I love baseball. I love the smell of my glove. I love the serenity of a ball field. I love the zen of a game of catch. I can play catch forever. When I have a glove on one hand and a ball in the other, I am right with the world. And let me tell you, I did not expect to get what I got when I went down to the DR to do this project. This is not what I signed up for. I wanted to hang out with ball, right? I just want to hang, and I wanted to hear like nice stuff. I wanted to hear the essence of what it is to be a ball player, the things that we love. And I talked about those things, and I had a wonderful time doing them. What is this? What's your favorite sound? What's your favorite smell? What is this? The smell of new mown grass. All of that is wonderful, and that is part of what makes ball. But there's this really ugly other side that I don't think we realize when we watch TV and we applaud our heroes, or when we talk smack about them because they have failed us in some way. We don't fully realize sort of what goes on. which is why I want to talk a little bit about poverty, make that maybe a little bit more real. Talk about the baseball industry, maybe make that a little bit more real. And I can't do that in the time that we have. And I really want to wrap this up because I want you guys to talk to me. Because baseball should be a dialogue, right? So I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know I was gonna have to talk about sex tourism and the destruction of moral fiber and how baseball is used to help eradicate that and train boys and girls to make better choices so that if and when they get a major league contract, they will be able to deal with that. They will be able to deal with the money, they will be able to deal with the life ahead of them, and they will be able to deal with it if they don't get it at all. Because if nothing else, they will have something inside rather than outside. As a friend of mine said, Luis Hernandez said, Liz, money is great to buy shoes with, but it can't make you happy. And this is from a man who has nothing. So 11-year-old boys playing for their lives. I didn't mention things like 35 years of people blasting MLB for human rights infractions, from not having doctors, from Yuri Guillen dying of meningitis on the Orioles' time, and how the Orioles paid off his parents so they wouldn't come after him with a lawsuit, and they wouldn't talk about it to anyone after again. And there are great people in MLB. There are great people all over the world, and there are bad people all over the world. But we're talking about an industry, a business, a profit-motivated industry called, in the DR, una industria sin chimeneas, a factory without smokestacks. So here we are blessed. And I think every time we watch a ball game, or talk smack about our players, or applaud them for having overcome their situation, we ought to remember that we're blessed, and we ought to reflect a little bit about what that situation is, right? So we should still enjoy ball. We should absolutely watch ball, and we should absolutely talk about ball. But I think these kinds of things, for me, I didn't want to know. Like I'm sure looking at you, y'all don't want to know. But the fact of the matter is I still love baseball after knowing that. I still love baseball, and I watch baseball, and I play baseball. With that knowledge, it only deepens what I know, and I think that that has to be true for all of us, right? I don't consume ball passively. I go out on the field, and I fight to win. I fight for my place on the field. I fight to prove myself as a girl, week after week, year after year, and I'm very successful. And I still fight. Never, never passive. When I watch ball, I don't consume it passively. I'm actively engaged not only in the game. Now don't tell me none of you don't yell at the TV and start talking to people, right? I'm active in that game, not passively consuming it. And I'm also aware of the other things that flow through baseball, because baseball is not simply a game. If we look very closely at it, it's a window to the world, right? It's a window to the world that we live in, and looking at it closely, in the case of the DR, we learned something about the DR, but looking at it closely, we learn something about our own community as well. We learn about our own nation and our own world, and how what we do, the choices we make, impact others. So 11-year-old boys in Princeton, New Jersey, in the Dominican Republic, let me tell you, we are blessed. So I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to thank St. Thomas Aquinas and Professors Bowen and McCarthy, and thanks to Dave Ing and everyone who got this together. Please, let's talk.
We have some time for questions, so if anybody has questions about her experience or just about thoughts on baseball in general, or your thoughts on this topic, please feel free to share. Somebody must have some.
How long did you stay there?
I did 22 weeks in total, but I did it,
over several trips. So I started in 2007, I went back twice in 2009, and then back in 2011, and I'm due for another trip. Yeah. So what do you guys think it means to talk to people who nobody else will talk to? These people I work with not only are pretty marginalized people, MLB doesn't confer with them. They might come over when they want to sign someone. They might give them some balls every once in a while, but there's no real working with what they call la base, the base, the foundation, ground level work, right? MLB is a protected state. They don't work with anyone. The Dominican Federation of Baseball, the top baseball organization in the country, MLB has nothing to do with them. They benefit from them. Fidobi helps put together a World Classic. They host games between like the military teams, and in that MLB benefits, they'll put together things like this, but there's no talking, there's no helping, there's no conferring about what might be the best way to do things, how to help young boys in a situation where there is no legal infrastructure.
Go ahead.
Wouldn't they benefit if they did help all the people on the ground? Because then they would have more stuff to play with and it would ultimately benefit them.
I think you're absolutely right. And my collaborators would agree with you. You have to build it from the ground up. The stronger the ground is, the stronger the foundation is, the stronger the better the structure will hold. You're absolutely right. Yet they do not.
Shouldn't, I mean, to play a sort of devil's advocate, but perhaps not, shouldn't Major League Baseball, why should we care what Major League Baseball does at the ground level in the Dominican Republic? Should we be more concerned, for example, what Major League Baseball can do for communities in the United States, urban areas? After all, they provide a dream for these folks. Isn't that dream enough to give some opportunity?
I don't know, guys. Is the dream enough? That would be the argument, right? So we could deny that stuff like that happens, or we could say, like, well, as some people have, well, but if they didn't have that, what would they do? Would they be picking mangoes, or like working the street, or walking the beach selling, tchotchkes? So RBI is a great institution, right? And there's also RBI in the DR. So it's not just the academies, there is RBI down there. And they don't have anything to do with them either. Their headquarters is in Centro Olímpico, which is the head place in San Domingo for all of sport. And it's one block down from the Dominican Federation of Baseball, and they don't have anything to do with one another. But MLB presence gives a lot to the country, a lot. It gives more for individuals, and it gives more for some people who are behind the scenes than it does really for the populace. But I think people seem to be sure that MLB reaps more benefits than it reinvests in the country. And so, yeah, I think MLB should put more investment in the United States. But if it's going and harvesting ball players in another area, they certainly ought to refertilize and cultivate and develop that land. And in fact, that business would be more profitable, not only for MLB certainly, but then for everyone. You guys got any thoughts on that? So what do you think about this idea of, well, nah, it doesn't happen. Nah, it's baseball. They don't harvest human bodies. They don't dispose of them. They don't do anything creepy out there in the world. Anyone know any history of baseball? You should read up on that. It's always been a money-making industry since after the Civil War. So this is nothing new. After the Civil War, they started selling tickets, and more people came, and so they started building stadiums, and more people came. And then they instituted the draft to get rid of scouts because it made more money for the owners of the teams. Just cut that right out. I love baseball, but it got to be realistic. And so is it okay for any of us to go into another country and to look for cheap labor? I ask you tonight, when you're getting ready for bed, to look at the labels on your clothing. And ask yourself if you know where that country is. And ask yourself how much that labor is made to make that Gap shirt that is of a moderate price for us, right? The luxury. Why do we have luxuries? Because other countries have made that affluence for us. Dominican Republic is one of them. Caribbean is one of them. Yes?
Do you think MLB will return to Cuba now that we have,
Absolutely. And be ready for a lot of very interesting chatter politically and economically, and and couched in baseball terms. I suspect a lot of like romantic ideas about this reunion. And so I also think tourism and sex tourism is going to go back as well. It will be 1958 all over again. But it will be really interesting to see what happens to the DR when Cuba reopens. I would absolutely expect that salaries, contract offers will go down with the threat of Cuba hanging over them. There's always a threat, right? PED use, threat, salaries go down, agent identity fraud, these sorts of things. And by the way, the Dominican Republic does not produce any performance-enhancing drugs. They come from the United States. So when people tell you it's a problem in the Dominican Republic, it's not a problem of production of the item. It's a problem of someone's bringing it into the country. And as the head of the Olympic Committee and part of the anti-drug force on the Olympics, has said to me, Liz, steroids is a problem of sports, not of baseball. If it is a problem of baseball, it's a problem of Major League Baseball. And if it's unsolved, it's because MLB has not solved it yet. And I speak very broadly, but that was the idea. So absolutely, there's going to be a fall in tourism, there's going to be a fall in contracts, and there's going to be a lot of, I think, machinations behind the scene about money and control because of Cuba's opening up. So that's going to be an awesome thing to watch, you guys. That's very easy. It'll be right in your face. So you can watch ball and you can, remember all this stuff.
One more question?
Surely someone wants to talk about those balls I know you're going to walk out with.
Yeah, don't steal the balls.
Don't steal the balls. I made them.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.